the legendary Tienda de Cuervo inspection of 1757. While Camargo was physically founded a few years earlier in 1749 by José de Escandón, this 1757 royal inspection was the definitive, official census and military review that solidified the villa's legal standing, mapped out its population, and set the stage for the formal distribution of the famous Porciones land grants, like Portion 93. The midsummer sun over the Rio Grande did not merely shine, it pressed against the earth like a blacksmith's iron. On this afternoon, the 13th of July 1757, the dust rising from the central plaza of the Villa de Santa Ana de Camargo was thick enough to taste. For 8 years, the settlers had cleared the thorny mesquite brush, braved the erratic floods of the San Juan and Rio Grande rivers, and slept with one eye open to guard against sudden raids. But today the threat was not arrows or high water. Today the crown had come to audit their blood and sweat. Standing under the shaded portico of the rudimentary municipal hall, Don José Tienda de Cuervo adjusted the heavy lace cuffs of his uniform, completely unsuited for the brutal northern heat. Sent by the Viceroy of New Spain to inspect the progress of José de Escandón's colonization project, Tienda de Cuervo held a leather-bound ledger open on a makeshift table. Beside him sat Fray Juan Bautista Garcia Ruiz, the Franciscan missionary whose eyes darted across the crowd, silently vetting the souls and histories of his flock. "Call the list," Tienda de Cuervo commanded, his voice sharp. "Let us see if these citizens are soldiers capable of holding a frontier or merely ghosts on paper." The captain of the squadron stepped forward, unrolling the census sheet. In the middle of the plaza stood the families. Among them, a distinct cluster of kin began to shift into place, a faction whose blood and bone were rapidly becoming intertwined with the very soil of the river valley. The Longorias. "Gertrudis Longoria," the captain barked into the hot air. A collective murmur rippled through the crowd as a woman stepped out of the ranks. Gertrudis walked with a quiet, rigid dignity that only the frontier could beat into a person. She did not wear an iron breastplate or carry a firearm. She was a widow, the wife of the late Matias de la Garza Falcón. Yet she did not approach as a dependent. Flanked closely by her 4 children, she looked the royal inspector dead in the eye. Fray Juan Bautista leaned over, whispering into the inspector's ear, confirming her legitimacy as an independent head of household and a pillar of the community. Tienda de Cuervo dipped his quill and scratched into the parchment. Gertrudis Longoria viuda tiene 4 hijos. She had no weapons to present, but her 4 children stood as her armor, and her presence was a defiant statement that her household would help anchor this town for generations. Antonio Longoria. As Gertrudis stepped back into the crowd, a hardened man with skin cured like saddle leather strode forward. Antonio was a widower, but he did not stand alone. Beside him walked his brother, their shoulders squared against the heat. Between them they hauled a formidable arsenal, flintlock muskets, heavy iron swords, and thick bull-hide shields, capable of catching an arrow mid-flight. Behind the brothers, an indigenous servant led a string of 9 muscular horses, their hooves stamping impatiently in the dirt. All required weapons present, your mercy, the squadron captain verified, inspecting the firing mechanisms of their firearms. Tienda de Cuervo nodded in approval. 9 horses meant mobility. It meant that when the smoke signals rose from the outlying ranches, the Longoria brothers could saddle up, mount a defense and secure the perimeter within minutes. The quill moved again. Antonio Longoria, widow, has 1 brother, all arms and 9 horses. The list ground on, and the heat intensified, but the Longoria presence in the plaza only grew more formidable. Francisco López de Jaén. Francisco stepped up, but he did so hand in hand with his wife, Maria de Longoria. To look upon them was to look upon a small army in its own right. Emerging from the dust behind them was a veritable sea of children. 10 of them, ranging from toddlers to strapping young men ready for the militia. The crowd watched in awe as their handlers brought forth their livestock asset, 20 horses and a sturdy pack donkey. In a wilderness where a single horse could mean the difference between life and death, a herd of 20 was a small fortune. It was a declaration of elite frontier status. Francisco and Maria were not merely surviving, they were building a dynasty. The inspector's ledger captured the staggering weight of their household. Francisco López de Jaén, married with Maria de Longoria, 10 sons, all arms, 20 horses and 1 burro. Directly behind them came Salvador Vela and his wife, Agueda Longoria, cementing the powerful alliance of surnames that would dominate the jurisdiction's ranching landscape. Salvador stood proud, his weapons polished, flanked by Agueda and their 7 children, leading 7 horses of their own. As the line advanced, the focus shifted to the younger branches of the family, proving that the roots of the lineage were spreading wide. José Salinas. José stepped up to the table alongside his wife, Petra Longoria. Petra held her chin high, her 3 young children gathered by her skirts. While they did not boast the massive cavalry herds of her older siblings, José proudly presented 5 fine, healthy horses. 5 horses meant safety. It meant they could pack up their household and outrun a flood or a raid. The inspector recorded them with an appreciative nod. José Salinas, married to Petra Longoria, has 3 sons and 5 horses. But the frontier was a harsh judge, and the next entry showed the raw grit it took to stay alive. Just ahead of the next Longoria, an impoverished neighbor stood forward with his son and 2 stepchildren taken in from a deceased relative, owning neither a single musket nor a horse to their name, relying purely on the community for defense. Then came the next call. Vicente Longoria. Vicente stepped into the dust alongside his bride, Maria de la Garza. Unlike his brothers, Vicente did not lay an iron sword or a flintlock musket upon the inspection table. He stood sin armas, without formal weapons. The grueling cost of settling the wild brush had stripped him of coin for imported steel. Yet, he was no pauper. He led 2 strong horses by their tethers, and his marriage to Maria bound him directly to the elite military lineage of the Garza Falcones. What he lacked in gunpowder he made up for in family blood. The inspector's quill noted the honesty of his rank. Vicente Longoria, married to Maria de la Garza, without arms and 2 horses. The line surged onward until the captain read the next name. José Andrés de Villarreal. José Andrés walked forward with an assured step, accompanied by his wife Anastasia Longoria. Between them their young son walked, blinking against the glare of the plaza. José Andrés unslung his firearm and unbuckled his sword, laying them perfectly beside each other on the table. Every required weapon was immaculate. Behind them 2 sturdy horses stood tethered, stamping in the dust. Though their household was small, Anastasia and her husband stood ready to guard the flanks of the villa. The quill scratched their vow into history. José Andrés de Villarreal, married to Anastasia Longoria, 1 son, all arms and 2 horses. Finally, as the afternoon shadow of the church began to lengthen across the plaza, a final name from the clan was called. Matías Longoria. The line parted. Matías did not stride forward with the aggressive confidence of his brothers. His face was pale, drawn from a severe illness that had plagued him for weeks, and his breathing was labored under the oppressive July heat. Yet, supported subtly by his wife Margarita de Hinojosa, a woman of formidable frontier stock herself, Matías refused to absent himself from the king's muster. "The man is infirmo, sick, your mercy," the captain noted quietly to the inspector. Tienda de Cuervo looked up from his ledger. He saw a sick man, yes, but he also saw 5 healthy children standing beside their father. He looked past them and saw 10 prime horses tethered at the edge of the square, and a complete array of regulation weapons laid out cleanly for inspection. Matías Longoria might have been ailing in body, but his estate was robust, his loyalty was absolute, and his family's grip on the frontier was unbreakable. Tienda de Cuervo smiled faintly, a rare concession from a crown bureaucrat, and wrote the final entry for the clan. Matías Longoria, infirmo, married to Margarita de Hinojosa, 5 sons, all arms and 10 horses. As the inspection concluded and the formal assembly dissolved into the dusk, the families began to drift back toward their homes along the barranca of the river. The next day, Don José Tienda de Cuervo closed the heavy ledger, the ink finally dry. He looked out over the sweeping, wild bend of the Rio Grande. He had come to find out if Camargo would collapse into the brush like so many failed settlements before it. But after seeing the Longorias stand in that plaza, the powerful widows, the wealthy cattle lords, the young couple starting with nothing but a pair of horses, and the sick man who refused to bow, he knew the truth. The crown had not subdued this land. Its people had, and they were there to stay. By the time of the July 1757 Tienda de Cuervo inspection there were a total of 92 pobladores, founding residents, with a total settler population of 637 people. The Longorias didn't just make up a tiny fraction of the town. With 9 distinct households, the family network accounted for nearly 10% of the entire civilian population of Camargo in 1757. They were becoming a massive power block on the river.